Hi, everyone. I'm Keith Mathis. Welcome today to as we talk about creating win-win vendor relationships. The emphasis of this is going to focus on how to cultivate some kind of positive relationship with your vendor for project success. The reason why you're getting a video this month and not being live is I ended up having to have a little bit of minor surgery. And I wasn't going to be able to do this. So to make sure that you got the right content, I wanted to do it early. So thank you so much for watching the video, even though we didn't do it live. We'll be back next month and do everything live. So when we talk about a vendor relationship, that's an interesting piece because vendor relationships are so important for everything that we do. So here's some objectives we're going to look at today. The webinar is going to emphasize vendor relationships, which is a crucial role in all of our projects. Also, we're going to look at building a strong partnership with that vendor, not only for a smooth project execution, which we obviously want that to be, but also to allow both parties to be able to benefit and to grow with that. Now, there's some terms that we might introduce that might be a little different to you, and so we'll define those as we go through. But the first one is going to be a vendor performance index, collaborative contracting, strategic sourcing mix, proactive risk mitigation, supplier empowerment, and integrated vendor partnership. And so a lot of these terms come from a vendor management mindset of how do we build our vendors and how do we take the vendors we have and build them into strategic partners for long term. And so what you're trying to do is, and you're going to feel that emphasis today, is that we're trying to move away from just having a vendor come in and do one thing and then we're out here looking for another vendor for something. We're looking for those situations to where we bring vendors in and we build that long-term relationship. And that's usually better for the vendor. It's usually better for us as well. So there's different types of vendors when we talk about hiring them. Specialized service providers, vendors who offer a unique niche service that is typically not available as a full-time employee. The one that came to my mind was the cybersecurity services in financial institutions. So you bring cybersecurity professionals in, they work with you, they make sure that everything is going to be as strong as possible with your firewalls and making sure that no one can breach any of these things and as much as they possibly can. And then when they finish, they're done. And so you're bringing them back at a later time if there's a problem. Second one would be technology vendors, vendors who supply technology products, including hardware, software. They float in, help you do an update or an upgrade of some sort, and then they float back out to other clients. And so those are very common. Third is going to be what we would call, for the purpose of this video, we're going to call them a third-party consultant. These are special consultants and experts hired to provide services temporarily. This could be like management consultants, strategic planning consultants. They're coming in. They don't come in very often, and so you might have them every 3 to 5 years to be able to come in and work with you on different things. And so that's one of the pieces that you find that you needed them for just that short period of time, but you're not looking for a real long-term relationship for them because you don't have anything except every 3, 5, 7 years or something like that. Now, the process for outsourcing to vendors can vary depending on your organization, but I wanted to lay some foundation with this to give you an understanding of what you're looking at. So creating a business case. So when an organization runs a project, they create a business case. Usually executives or management creates that, or the PMO. And the idea is that we're going to invest so much money into this project. What's going to be our return on investment and the value that we're going to get out of this? From that business case, many times people will then determine that they are looking for a vendor to either do all or some of that project. And so you determine the areas the vendor is going to work on. If they're going to do all of it, then you're going to put an RFP out that's going to talk about all of it. If they're going to do a portion of it, then you're going to have a scope for procurement. You're going to have a scope also for your internal people. So then you're going to be looking at determining and creating a deliverable list. That list will include several components in order to facilitate it. One is going to be creating an RFP that's your request for proposal. Then, of course, you're going to be analyzing some proposals of vendors, and you're going to select a vendor. You'll probably negotiate with them on some things, and then eventually a contract will be created. And then basically you will manage the contract most of the time between making sure the vendor is complying with the contract and that they're doing everything the contract asks for, and that all their work is quality. So from managing the contract, you might have a vendor orientation. You'll have numerous meetings with that vendor. You'll have reports, audits, inspections, all of those type of things to make sure that the vendor is going to be complying with everything. The Vendor Performance Index, one of the first terms that we gave you. So it's a tool one uses to assess and measure a vendor's performance. You might say, well, we're doing that with a contract. That's correct, but you're taking that contract in bite-sized pieces and you're looking at specific metrics. So a Vendor Performance Index would track quantifiable metrics. Typically, you're looking at quality, delivery, cost, and service levels. And depending on the type of contract you have is going to emphasize usually one of those with a little bit higher level. And so the customer might be working with the vendor and the vendor might be delivering everything on time and on budget, but let's say the quality's low. So you've got to have a specific level of quality there. Or they might have good quality and good delivery and good cost, but the service level's low. It takes forever for you to hear anything. It takes forever for them to contact you back. So all of those could be components of the Vendor Performance Index. And you might have you might have some quantifiable metrics here that's totally different for your type of project than what we have listed here. With a VPI, most organizations have minimal standards for their vendor. Those standards are typically included in the contract or the vendor agreement. They comply with key performance index of the organization. And so what's happening is that the organization's taking their KPIs, their key performance index, and they're finding vendors who's going to line up and support those. So that's going to be very important for organizations to find. Collaborative contracting. So collaborative contracting is a new approach to contracting that focuses on real-time collaboration, communication, and transparency between all parties. Collaborative contracting requires a strong cooperative spirit with high levels of trust, with both parties looking for mutual benefits. Normally, when you have collaborative contracting, both the vendor feels very comfortable with that customer and the customer feels very comfortable with the vendor. It's still a relationship under a contract, but what happens is it's a building relationship. It's a long-term relationship. The vendor's looking at trying to give and participate in a way of being able to shape that organization. That organization's wanting that shaping from that vendor. So collaborative contracting. With collaborative contracting process, you have pre-planning meeting to discuss goals, the scope and risks. You'll have joint discussions on the contract performance goals and incentives. You'll engage from the various team members to show transparency and support for the discussions and the outcomes. And you'll have open communication to everyone. So it's going to be very important for people to be able to communicate to anybody they want to when and as they do this. Also, joint risk engagement and management to avoid surprises. Clear performance metrics are set up front with agreement from all the parties. And then monitoring is to address any issue promptly. Continuous improvement with processes and services to overcome any kind of challenge. And so once again, it is just a fast-paced engagement. So no one feels like the other one is not going to engage if they need it. If they're putting in a phone call, they're going to get a call back quickly. You're going to it's going to be a mutual benefit for both in that type of relationship. So strategic sourcing mix is important. So as you look at a strategic sourcing mix, you're making a decision that you're going to bring vendors in, typically long-term or under contract for a period of time. Several things are going to play a role in that. It's not just low-cost provider, because we've all had that and done that in previous cases. You're wanting a decent price, but you're looking at a particular level of quality. So you're looking at cost, quality, delivery, risk, customer engagement, specialization. All of these different pieces will be part of your sourcing mix. If your organization is going to that next level to where you're looking at a vendor performance program, then you're looking at trying to fill roles of certain vendors in certain places that you know you're going to need. And so you're starting your vendor management office is looking to resource this and get these people in there at a particular time, and so that you're not having to constantly go through the request for proposal process. As you look at strategic sourcing mix, this is a tool used to evaluate and prioritize vendors based on specific categories, such as cost, quality, delivery, risk, customer engagement, specialization, all of these areas here. And one of these might be a higher importance depending on the type of project. And so you and the team are always talking about it, and you're working with your vendor management office, if you have one, to make sure that they have resourced and vetted some vendor to be able to handle that new initiative. Some steps organizations typically follow when conducting a strategic sourcing engagement would be a needs assessment where they identify and analyze the vendor's goods and services, a market analysis where they evaluate the supply market to understand the availability, the capabilities, potential performance, and supplier evaluation. So they create a list of ranked suppliers based on the organization's criteria. So this allows the organization to where when they decide they need training, for an example, they're not having to put it out for an RFP. These people are already under a contract. Or if they need people to come in and test or to write code, these people are already under contract. And so the goal behind this is speed, is really what it is, because you already have them under contract. And so since you already have them under contract, you're bringing them in almost instantly because you're not having to go through the entire process. You're bringing them in, signing a contract for what you want them to do. Supplier selection, choose a supplier with the highest ranking. So you're wanting somebody that's going to be cost effective, but you're wanting somebody who's going to participate in delivering high quality and wants the longer term relationship. A contract negotiation, you negotiate terms and conditions with that vendor. And the terms and conditions are not just price, it could be other pieces associated with it that you feel that you really need. Implementation and integration, integrate the supplier into the procurement process. So you're doing your background checks, you're doing everything associated with that vendor so that that vendor is ready to go. And so you might have them under contract, but they maybe aren't doing any work yet for 6 or 7 months. And so they understand how the vendor management programs work. And then you've got performance monitoring and benchmarking. You measure the new vendor against the performance standard. And so you're looking to make sure that they are delivering the level of quality that you thought they were going to deliver. You know they're delivering price, you put them under contract for that price, but you're wanting to make sure that they're delivering the level of quality that you thought they were going to deliver. Then you're looking at proactive risk mitigation. And so this is between the customer and the vendor. So proactive risk mitigation and vendor management focuses on the overall risk associated with a vendor, not the project risk. So the project risk is a side risk, obviously, that you're concerned about, and the vendor is going to help mitigate portions of this. But you're looking at the risk with that vendor. Is this vendor strong enough to be able to stay in here financially? Is this vendor going to cause us problems because they make bad decisions or do something silly with all the employees? How are they treating all the people? How do they get along with people? All of those are going to make a difference. So when working with the vendor, proactive risk focuses on areas such as providing critical services, supply chain performance, and external products. The process to follow in vendor risk would be risk identification, financial stability, quality standards, cybersecurity, regulatory compliance, market reputation. So you can see all these components here that you would be having to do some research on your vendor to make sure they comply in these areas. And then risk prioritization. Look for high priority risks and discuss ways the vendor is reducing them. And then ongoing monitoring of that vendor. And so the customer wants to see a proactive approach rather than reactive when a risk event happens. So if something happens, how fast does that vendor respond? How fast is that vendor trying to help put out the fire? And so you're wanting that type of engagement. So a vendor risk assessment, it can include a lot of things. It might be more than what we're showing you here. So the area to be vendored out, the possible vendors who can supply the service or the product, risk associated with this contract. So it could be risk of non-compliance, risk of financial instability, or risk of subcontractor non-compliance. That's assuming that the vendor that you've hired is also hiring subcontractors, which is very common in this world of vendor management. And then you've got some type of mitigation plan with that vendor on how and what they're going to do to be able to mitigate that contract. So supplier empowerment. The supplier has to be empowered to be able to do the job. We have them under contract. So vendors require empowerment to fulfill the services they're under contract to deliver. Supplier empowerment connects to the strategic focus with support through tools and autonomy to contribute to project goals as a pivotal resource for the customer. So we've got to be able to empower that that vendor to be able to work with the customer and to be able to work freely with that customer. You've got a contract, so you've got the guide rails of where that vendor is supposed to work. But sometimes the companies will put other things into where the vendor feels like they're getting pieces of information. So you're not wanting that to happen. You want the vendor to be able to run wide open if needed. When organizations withhold empowerment, they constrain the interaction and delivery of the vendor, which can hurt the output. So you want that vendor to be able to show that level of expertise that they have and to be able to do this freely within your organization. Typical process for supplier empowerment would be creating a vetting process to hire suppliers with similar values and goals, conducting an onboarding training or meeting with all vendors, making goals and objectives clear, and then setting up communication channels for when and how often clients and vendors will talk. Now, typically, when you have a vendor management program, you're talking more than just setting an appointment to talk. You have their phone number, you have their superior's phone number that you're working with, they have your phone number, and so you've got contacts that you're doing. Now, it doesn't keep you from sending an email and setting up an appointment or any of those type of things, but what you're doing is you've got instant access if you need that. You're defining key performance indicators to monitor the supplier's performance. So you might be defining delivery time, quality metrics, service levels, and once again, those service levels might have a time period on. You might, so if I put a phone call into you as my vendor, you have 24 hours. We know that you're going to get back to me within 24 hours. We know that the delivery time is going to be within 3 hours of when you say it's going to be. All of those types of things. You might have actual metrics there. Continuous improvement advancements to customize the products and services to the customer. And so that means that we're not just getting standard quasi service levels. We've got something special because we've got a long-term relationship with you. Integrated vendor partnerships. Now, this is a higher level because you and the vendor are working as one, even though they are a contracted resource. So integrated vendor partnerships allows the customer and the vendor to build relationships at various levels of expertise and service. This relationship focuses on long-term value that leads to long-term service, and the vendor partnership focuses on strategic long-term vendors who support organizational goals and objectives. When you're looking at integrated vendor partnerships, you really are looking at three different sides to this. You're looking at the transactional phrase, you're looking at the collaborative development, and you're looking at integrated partnership. And so the last step is going to be the integrated partnership. So if I'm not very good at collaborative development or transactional phase, then what's going to happen is that we're going to be falling apart here. So when we talk about the transactional phrase, you're looking at hiring a vendor to meet an immediate one-time need. When you're looking at collaborative development, you're looking at customers to see the value in using one vendor and both align for more connection. And so we're collaborating, we're talking, we're sharing ways that we can connect with other things. Then when you're looking at the integrated partnership, the vendor becomes a strategic partner for long-term service. And so this is where you work together long-term. And so for a vendor, this makes the most sense. I've been blessed to be able to have this with a lot of different companies. Ameren, we have worked with for a lot of years. FAA, this is our 15th year, even this morning. State of Kansas, we do all their project management training, and we're going into our 16th year now. So that works really well when you're talking about a vendor for long-term engagements to be able to do that. Reasons why organizations hire vendors. The first is they'll want to have access to specialized experts. The organization is not having to keep experts up or pay for certifications or pay for continuous recertifications. And so what they do is they hire somebody who has that. that person comes in and they're on the cutting edge. They've got the newest material, newest information. Second would be cost efficiency. Rather than have an additional full-time employee who has the specialized expertise and might require a higher salary than your typical employee, they can bring someone in and they pay more for that vendor short term, but they're only using that vendor for when they need them. You could have temporarily expand the resources. That's for a 6-month project. Meet tight deadlines. You brought another resource in, so your employees are not doing all of it. You're gaining an external perspective. This vendor is working with other type clients, and so they've got expertise, but they've also got insights of others and what others are doing in certain situations. And then, of course, risk management. This person will help drive down risk and make risk more manageable. Assess to specialized expertise. So engineering services for specialized industries such as automotive, aerospace, regulatory standards is a good example of this. Technical and IT focus on cybersecurity and software development or data management could also be an example of this. The point is that how often do you need some of these engineerings or the special engineering expertise? Might not be very often, but when you need them, you don't have time for somebody to get built up in being able to understand the engineering for aerospace. You needed them to come in and give input and feedback, and then, of course, you're willing to pay for that because then they'll go on elsewhere as well. Also, legal or compliance focuses on keeping the organization compliant with the standards or regulations. You find this with pharmaceutical companies, healthcare companies, finance companies. You'll find different organizations have different type of legal and compliance situations that they have to get into. So you want somebody who knows exactly what those rules are, and those rules change. So trying to keep some of your people up might not be cost effective. Logistics and supply chain focuses on inventory control, procurement, and efficiency standards. And so once again, having specialized people in the supply chain management or in inventory control can be a wealth of information. Cost efficiency. Everybody wants it to be cheaper, obviously, but hiring vendors removes the need to hire that full-time employee, which means you're not providing insurance, you're not providing benefits for that person. So outsourcing avoids the cost of benefits, training, insurance, overhead expenses. You might have temporary overhead expenses where the person is going to sit and work for a short period of time, but once they're done, and so you don't have those expenses any longer. Organizations will hire vendors when they're needed, and then they're removed, and so you're able to you hire them for specialization, then you let them go when they're finished. Risk reduction is typical when using vendors with expertise and best practices in specific fields. Vendors can follow their expertise, reducing the potential for failure and risk. And so cost efficiency helps with that because, once again, they have more expertise in that customized area of risk, and that helps them. Temporarily expanding your resources. Because you're not hiring them as a full-time employee, but you did need additional help or resources for specific work. That's what makes sense. So an increase in temporary resources can help organizations be more flexible and scalable to support sales, marketing, and project needs. And so that allows them to be able to come on board. So expanding resources can assist with tight deadlines or help manage peak workloads without hiring full-time employees for the long term. Meeting tight deadlines. A project runs on deadlines, and some deadlines have more versatility than others. And so once again, you bring in a resource in to kind of crash that part of the project or to fast track it. Vendors can increase purchasing power and working efficiency by using multiple vendors on various project deliverables. Also, organizations can scale up or down based on the project demands to meet the tight deadline. And so once again, that's what you need. You need 3 additional consultants to work for 6 months, and then you don't need them for 6 more years. So that's why you use something like this to help you meet tight deadlines. You can gain an external perspective. Some organizations can get caught in the silo effect and only view business and projects through a limited viewpoint. We see this all the time with organizations. All you know is your type of project and your type of organization because you've been there so long. And that's pretty typical. But other vendors, when vendors come in, they're exposed to a lot of different organizations. And so they see a lot of different solutions that are working in some of these. So vendors have expertise from various industries and clients who try different solutions for specific outcomes. Those different solutions makes a difference on giving options to that customer. Thinking outside the box or industry could help a project consider a different solution. So, a lot of different questions that the vendor might be asking that will help generate some of these ideas. So, how are other industries using this tool or technology? What risk or challenges did they experience when implementing it for the organization? What would they do differently now that they have finished that project? Also, what was their most significant risk in the implementation process? Once again, you're getting information from historical data that other organizations have used. Under risk management, you've got operational risk. Does the vendor have good internal processes, procedures, and performance standards to support project delivery? If they have good internal processes, then you see their organization as being healthy. If they don't, then what makes you think that they're going to bring good processes to your organization if they don't have it in theirs? And then financial risk. Does the vendor's financial stability sustain current and future operations? For an example, you sign a contract and they're going to be bringing in 25 people. Do they even have 25 people right now? That doesn't mean they can't hire them. But once again, this might be overload for that company that's never hired 25 before. A reputational risk. Does the vendor have a good reputation in the industry? Address problems when they arise? What does Better Business Bureau say about them? And so a lot of times when people hire a vendor, they hire a vendor, but then they're shocked that they have such a horrible reputation. Strategic risk. Does the vendor have long-term goals that align with strategic initiatives that support the customer's goals? If the vendor's goals do not support the customer goals, there's going to be a knocking of the heads periodically because the vendor's going to be recommending things that are outside the range of what the customer is wanting. Processes in hiring and monitoring the vendor. So for an example, conducting a background check on each vendor. This has become very standard because of security, also because of just trying to protect the organization. So background checks are very common. Set clear expectations and metrics of how you're measuring that vendor. And so this needs to be very quantifiable. And part of those expectations and metrics is how are they getting paid? Are they being paid on deliverables? Are they going to be paid based on every 2 weeks? Most vendors and vendor relationships work better if you have clear deliverables of how and what that vendor is going to be paid. Organize periodic performance reviews, use technology to track some areas of performance, audit quality and compliance requirements, establish open communication channels. And so you should be talking to that vendor with some regularity on a weekly or biweekly basis about that project. And so once again, you want that open-ended rather than just there's a fire and now we're going to talk. So a process for auditing the vendor. This is sometimes clumsy for people because they feel like Big Brother is watching. Well, Big Brother is watching. And so that's exactly what you're doing. So here's a couple of things that we want to look at here. So first off, project baseline. So the project is baselined on how, and you're going to start measuring from that point there. And so it's required documents. What required documents do you need from that vendor? So you might be looking for earned value type of calculations. You might be looking for status. You might be looking for Gantt charts. You might be looking for change orders, all of those. Then you're looking at audit to verify the vendor meets standards and metrics. And so if you don't have those standards and metrics or that's not the right ones, then you're having to create those. You're analyzing the variances. And so did they meet the requirements? If the answer is no, then you've got change management to get them to bring that, whatever it is that they did, up to the level of quality. And that's not something you should be paying for. If it wasn't based on a change that you requested, that's something that they should be complying with because it was not standard when they did this. And so if it meets requirements and those requirements have been accepted, then you've got continuous monitoring. If they didn't meet the requirements, you've got a gap analysis. And that gap analysis is going to make a difference on what requirements documents because you're wanting to make sure that gap is now fulfilled. So you should be doing an audit periodically on your vendors to make sure that they are complying. You shouldn't get to the end of the project and then be stumped and surprised that, wow, how did we get here and we didn't even know it? Something's wrong with the process there. challenges in the vendor relationship. So the first is data transparency. Leverage vendor management systems or software for centralized vendor data. Now, the vendor's not going to give you all data. So if you've got him or that company or her in a fixed price contract, they're not going to give you data on their finances. That's probably not going to happen. However, the data transparency that's there is you're seeing data, you're seeing real live data about the project and how it's doing, what risks have come up, what risks they're dealing with. So you're actually seeing evidence that is helping justify some of the decisions that were made. Managing multiple vendors. Do you divide vendors by assignment, manage the deliverables of the vendors separately? So this is very important as well. So can you have 3 or 4 vendors who are all painters? The answer is yes, but sometimes it's a little bit of a challenge to manage them. And once again, you're looking at, do all of them follow the values and vision that we have for our organization? Relationship and communication issues. Establish regular communication and feedback loops with the vendor. Also, cost control, review vendor costs and budget overruns, and then change order costs. Verify that the change orders are approved and completed by the vendor. So if it's a fixed price contract, the change orders are going to cost you. I mean, the long and short of it is it's going to cost you. The only ones that should not cost you something is if the vendor did not meet the level of quality or the standard that you had set. So that change that's happening should not be something that a customer should be paying for. The vendor is trying to comply is what they're trying to do. But if the customer comes in and wants the vendor to make changes, that vendor is going to be charging you a premium for those change orders in a fixed price contract. Monitoring of the vendors in the future. AI will provide real-time performance monitoring in the future. And I think you're going to start seeing this happen within the next 24 months. You're going to see artificial intelligence monitoring live data on what's happening with these projects. Risk management, compliance, automatic vendor communication and feedback. I think you're going to see a lot of these different pieces. Already people are testing out the ability for AI to attend a meeting with us and turn that meeting into transcripts, and that's becoming part of the archives. And so you're starting to see where technology is taking over some of these pieces. What you're going to see down the road is it will start monitoring some of the performance and giving us triggers on if something's wrong, or give us information that everything is compliant with that vendor. Diversity in vendor management. So supplier diversity programs. So you present the value of integrating diverse suppliers, including socioeconomic, geographical, and demographical diversity. Diversity can mean a lot of different things. It's not just the same people who live close by. And it also means that can we be open to other types of vendors from literally all around the world? Sometimes you can. In some of those situations. In some cases, you're not going to be able to. But the point is, do we have a diversified level or foundation of vendors that we are using and can use in this situation? And then inclusion and vendor selection. Techniques to ensure inclusive selection criteria that align with the organizational values and social responsibility. So can we be inclusive based on age, or based on ethnicity, or based on educational range? I mean, there might be a lot of different things that we can have certain programs to bring certain pockets of vendors in. Tracking diversity metrics, tools, and KPIs for tracking supplier diversity and ensuring continuous alignment with inclusion goals. And so we want a diverse group. We want our people to see someone that looks like them training, or someone that looks like them consulting with that organization. We want that type of diversity, and that's going to be very important in all of those areas. Ethical and sustainable vendor practices. You want an ethical vendor, and that vendor wants an ethical customer. So corporate social responsibility. It's important that vendors follow corporate social responsibility, CSR guidelines, and align with ethical sourcing. You're not trying to pay somebody off. You're not trying to give a kickback because you got a contract. You're doing your best to be able to work with that vendor, and that vendor to work with you, and realize that everybody's squeaky clean. That's what you're wanting. Environmental compliance. ensuring vendors meet environmental standards, particularly in high impact industries. And there are different type of environmental compliance issues. Not only, we're not talking about just the property and the land, but we could be talking about all other type of regulatory things. Also, fair labor practices, assessing vendors for fair labor practices, including workers' rights and anti-discrimination policies. You're not wanting to hire a vendor who discriminates against their own people or is mean-spirited with their people and abusive with their people. So all of these type of practices could actually hurt you as a customer because you've hired a bad vendor who hits the newspaper and then the newspaper reports that they're working on this big project for you. So you're wanting to make sure that you've checked those things out as well. Best practices for those win-win solutions. So create an informational onboarding session for vendors. You want to lay the foundation for the vendor instantly when you bring them under contract. Market the program and emphasize value. So those vendors who aren't looking for long-term work in the sense of being connected to a customer long-term, I don't understand that, but I'm sure there are some who are not interested in that. But there's going to be enough vendors out here who want that long-term relationship. Establish performance-based incentives. So what is it about that vendor that we can connect to that's performance-based and be able to pay them or be able to reward them for that level of work? Utilize a centralized vendor management system. This is what we were talking about earlier when we said that you have a group who's looking to fill the pockets and the gaps so that you hire vendors, you go ahead and get them under contract, and then you're not always starting and stopping with your vendor relationships because of the procurement process. Work to keep excellent vendors long-term, and work to be able to verbalize that with the vendors so that you can keep them long-term. With the clients that we have that we've been 10, 15, 18 years with, I know a lot about that organization. I know a lot about their people. And so when I'm going in or we're writing a new program for them, I understand a lot of behind the scenes of what they're doing or what they're needing to do and what some of the frustrations are that they're getting into. Advanced vendor metrics and continuous improvement. So real-time performance tracking. I think this is going to be handled by AI down the road, but nevertheless, we need that real-time performance tracking. Leveraging technology for live tracking and data-driven adjustments allows us to be able to know what's happening with that project instantly. Bringing in 360-degree feedback, gathering feedback from all internal stakeholders on vendor performance. Vendors are not going to be perfect on everything, and there's always going to be an area for continuous improvement. Just like a customer is not always perfect on everything, and there's areas for continuous improvement for that customer too. But we do want to be able to have a mutual, respectful evaluation of the contract, the working relationship, so that we can continuously improve this. You're not going for the jugular, you're not trying to hurt somebody's feelings, you're not trying to do anything, but how can we go to that next level in that relationship? That's what you're desiring to do. And then Kaizen and continuous improvement techniques, very important for when we're looking at continuous improvement. So Kaizen, as you know, is a Japanese term that being used for continuous improvement. So encouraging vendors to adopt a Kaizen and other continuous improvement methodologies for process optimization, and is very important because you're wanting that vendor to continue to grow, you're wanting that vendor to continue to improve, and you're wanting your relationship to do that. If the vendor qualifies right now, but if they don't grow, if they don't continue to educate themselves in their areas, then eventually they're going to max out on all that we can draw from them. And so you're needing a vendor that's even higher and deeper with that expertise. Vendor dependency and continuity planning. So reduce over-compliance on single vendors, strategies for diversifying vendor sources to prevent bottlenecks. You'll see organizations who have one vendor and only one vendor in this area, and that might not be the smartest thing, especially if that vendor is frustrated with the organization or they feel like they've arrived and that the organization is obligated to them. The organization is not obligated to any of us. You want a long-term relationship with somebody who wants to have a long-term relationship, who's not trying to be a hot dog and not trying to be somebody who is trying to lord something over one party or the other. So that might mean that you bring in and you make sure you have additional vendors on tap in case you want them. Continuity programs will ensure vendors have continuity and recovery plans to mitigate service disruption risk, and anything could happen on any of our projects. But the point is, you're wanting a vendor who's in there trying to put the fires out with you. And then transition management, planning for seamless transition in case of vendor exit or performance issues. So if we're looking at transition management, we're looking at that when that vendor retires or when that vendor gets ready to no longer have the contract, can they transition what they've done and how they've done it over to the other person? Now, we're not talking about proprietary stuff, but we are talking about being able to inform that new vendor on how things run and what has been done in the past. New vendor will probably do new stuff and do their own thing. That's the long and short of it. But can we transition them over, which is going to be important. Now, let me talk about a couple of things so that as we bring this to the close and get you all taken care of. First off, next month. Next month, I should be with you live, okay? So empowerment through mentorship. Leveraging coaching, mentoring, and knowledge transfer in project excellence. We're going to be talking about that in next month's webinar, okay? And then January 17th will be our webinar called The Enterprise PMO, How to Stay Relevant in a Changing World. And then February 7th will be the role of emotional intelligence in project leadership. So we'll be talking about that. Those are three strong 1-hour webinars that we will be bringing to you live on those dates. And so Kim will be emailing something out to you and getting that to you quickly. On 2024, we're coming down to our last boot camp. December 9 through 12 will be our last boot camp. We do our boot camps every other month, and we do them virtually. We're still running about 97% first-time passing rate for the PMP certification, and PMI is still advertising that about 60% pass typically first time. So we're real proud of our first time passing rate. So December 9 through 12 will be our next one. And then, of course, we've got one in February, one in April, and so forth. So we have it about every 2 months. And so if you're still looking to get your PMP, this is all new material. This is all material that's aligned with the way the test is now after it changed in 2022. And so it's going to be great material for you to be able to go through and pass the test. And then if you need additional help, don't hesitate to call me, send me an email or something like that. This is our 800 number that comes into us, and you're connected to our website, I'm sure, and other webinars. But we'd love to be able to help you or be able to give you some type of input into something that you're trying to do. And so send me an email, and I'll be glad to do that, okay? So anyway, let me finish here today. Let me thank you again for watching the video and not being here live because of this little hiccup that happened. And I'll see you next month live. And so anyway, I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving, wonderful Christmas. And so I'll be seeing you in December just before Christmas, and we'll be doing one more webinar for the year 2024 will be behind us. Thank you so much for being here today. God bless you, and I'll see you next month. Okay? Bye, everybody.